Dr. Soltes. Now, Dr. Soltes has spent a lifetime wrestling with questions that resonate through the history of human experience. His dynamic teaching, lecturing, curating, and writing reflect a broad series of interests and unique ability to combine them in unusual ways that are thought-provoking and both challenging and intellectually exciting. Now, he currently serves as a professor of theology, philosophy, and art history at Georgetown University in D.C. That's where we used to have our little stomping grounds. I may have crossed paths with him a couple times in that snow. He also has taught at Western Reserve University, Siegel College in Cleveland, and other colleges and universities across the country. As director of the National Jewish Museum, he co-founded the Holocaust Art Restitution Project and has spent 10 years researching and consulting on the issue of Nazi-plundered art. Now, he has over 200 publications, books to go beyond mention, as well as articles and catalog essays. They've all included, among others, Sacred Signs, How Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Art Draw from the Same Source, Searching for Oneness, Mysticism in the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Traditions, The Ashen Rainbow, The Arts of the Holocaust, also the famous Jewish Trials, From Jesus to Jonathan Pollard. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Soltes.
Later this evening, what we're all really waiting for is David Darling and what's his name? Coleman, what's his name? Because, of course, Coleman Barks is renowned. 21 volumes, did I get that right? A large number of them anyway, focusing on Rumi. And Rumi, of course, for those of you who don't know, or for those of you who wish to be reminded, is a very important 13th century mystic. His poetry is the particular verbal instrument that he used to express his thinking about things mystical. Mysticism is a term that comes from a Greek verb, mystein, meaning to hide, to close, or by extension to hide. And so the mysterion is that which is hidden. And the mystic believes that garden variety religion only accesses the externalities with respect to God, that there's something deeper, more inner, more recessed, more hidden, that the mystic seeks. And Rumi, who himself began very much as a kind of legalist, would eventually, for reasons beyond what we have time for in this discussion, arrive at the conclusion that his teachings, as deep as they went, didn't go deeply enough. And he himself became a mystic. He became an explorer of recesses in God that he hadn't found before. And like Muslim mystics before and since, his starting point for the process of engaging toward the mysterion, to becoming filled with Godness, is what's called dhikr. It's from an Arabic word, the root of which means memory or to remember. It's remembering God's presence all the time. And most typically in most Sufi tariqas, most Sufi groups, the method of dhikr is verbal. But for Rumi, as the more and more he began to talk about and get involved in thinking and feeling about what he was talking about, he would jump around. He lost a lot of students that way who thought he was a little bit, bonkers. But it ultimately eventuated as a kind of formalized way of physical dhikr, which would involve a spinning process. And those of you who are familiar with the whirling dervishes, they come out of the Rumi tariqah, know that they can spin starting on a dime and stopping on a dime, and in between spinning for hours. One hand pointed up, one hand pointed down, so that each individual, as it were, becomes a kind of bridge that connects earth and heaven, humanity and divinity. But Rumi also was unique, not only within the Sufi world, but unique within the mystical world, in offering a very specifically directed mode of engaging God from a Muslim point of view, as a Jewish mystic might from a Jewish point of view, as a Christian mystic might from a Christian point of view, but realizing that ultimately all paths lead to the same mysterion in all these traditions. And so among the things for which Rumi was renowned is the kind of universalist expressions that he offered. I go into the Muslim mosque and the Jewish synagogue and the Christian church, and I see one altar. Or in a different turn of phrase, not Christian or Jew or Muslim, not Hindu, Buddhist, Sufi or Zen, not any religion or cultural system. I'm not from the East or the West, not out of the ocean or up from the ground, not natural or ethereal, not composed of elements at all. I do not exist. I'm not an entity in this world or the next. Did not descend from Adam and Eve or any origin story. My place is placeless, a trace of the traceless, neither body or soul. I belong to the beloved, having seen the two worlds as one, and that one call to and know, first, last, outer, inner, only that breath-breathing human being. And if you think about the way in which he has expressed himself, you might be confused for a moment in the middle of those words, because part of the time it seems to be the mystic who is speaking. Part of the time, I'm not an entity in this world or the next, did not descend from Adam and Eve or any other origin story. One realizes it's God itself speaking. The mystic is the conduit through which God speaks. The mystic has become so entirely filled with Godness that he can't distinguish between himself and God. And at that moment, the words that come out are words as if from God, and those words are all about the fact that there are an endless array of paths that bring one to oneness with God, and not a single prescribed path. That's what Rumi, in the 13th century, while all kinds of other things are going on in that century, if you think back to it, it's the last century of the Crusades, just to give you one example, that end in 1291. So while that part of the world is going on, the Rumi part of the world is going on in a very, very different sort of way. Fethullah Gulen, who was born 70 some odd years ago in Turkey, the place where Rumi ended up spending most of his life. He came from the part of what was then the Persian Empire that is now called Afghanistan. So he's an Afghani, Persian, Turkish mystic and poet, as it were. Gulen has evolved, of course, into a profound and important teacher and preacher over the decades in Turkey and then beyond Turkey, and of course a writer of considerable power, who is influenced by a range of thinkers that begin with Socrates and end with Einstein and everybody in between, but important among those, Rumi. And Gulen follows the pattern of thinking that is expressed by Rumi in those fragments of poetry from which I just read, in demanding of those who would follow his lead that they be tolerant of all of humanity, as he says, to have hearts wide like the ocean, to seek to become more perfect beings, for the most perfect among human beings are those who are at ease and intimate in the company of other human beings, that is to say, all human beings. Those who do not embrace all of humankind with tolerance and forgiveness have lost their worthiness to receive forgiveness and pardon. Those who curse will be cursed. Those who beat will be beaten. If true Muslims observe such Quranic principles as the following and were to go on their way and tolerate curses deep in their breasts, then others would appear in order to implement the justice of destiny on those who cursed us. He defines, Gulen does, Muslim as someone who conforms to his description of being all-embracing, of being tolerant, of being someone who submits to the will of God by expressing that. Being tolerant does not mean forgoing the traditions that come from our religion. Rumi doesn't cease to be a Muslim because he is at the same time a universalist. It's that he sees no contradiction between being Muslim and universalist. Gulen drinks from the same sort of well. The Ottomans were faithful both to their religion and to other values, and at the same time they were a great nation that could get along with other world states. In the name of dialogue, we can unite on common ground and shake hands with all. This is because the things that God gives most value to are human beings, love and compassion, but the interesting thing is that Gulen even goes beyond human beings in his sense of universalism. In his essay, Love for Humankind, he writes in part how our interest in our environment and our love for humankind, that is, our ability to embrace creation, depends on knowing and understanding our own essence, our ability to discover ourselves, and to feel a connection with our Creator. And he goes on to talk about the importance of embracing not only each other, but embracing the world around us. He preaches a kind of philosophy that would properly be called pan-henotheism. Theos is the Greek word for God, heno is a Greek word meaning one, and pan means all. So pantheism, you're all familiar with that term. Gods are everywhere. The trees are gods. The rivers are gods. Pan-henotheism is a different concept. It's that the one God is found everywhere in everything. So Gulen's universalism is one that cuts not only across sectarian and denominational lines, it cuts across lines that connect humanity to that which is beyond us. It connects us to the sky and the earth and the trees and the rivers, because we can recognize not only the godness in each of us, but in everything around us. Moreover, Gulen and the movement inspired by him with its many manifestations is one that doesn't stop in thinking about these issues as theory, as words to speak or to write about, but thinks in terms of how one actively can transform the world into a better place by following these kinds of ways of thinking. For him, of course, the starting point is education, for young and old. Children, Gulen writes, form the most active and productive part of a community every 30 or 40 years. Those who have little children and pay no attention to them should consider how important an element of a people's life they are, disregarding and shudder. Whatever is spent for the upbringing of young generations to elevate them to the rank of humanity will be like an inexhaustible source of income. And his goal in having inspired the creation of schools from the elementary to the university level that are really not only in Turkey and throughout the Turkic parts of the world, but now throughout the world, is to transform those who are educated from theorists to activists. That the whole goal of the Gulen educational system is to breed people who are altruists, who will serve others and not just their own needs. And if any of you, as some of you probably have visited Gulen schools, you will see teachers and administrators who are not there 9 to 5 and gotta go. They're there as many hours of the day and night as their students need them. And their students are therefore learning from example how to be there for others. These new men and women, Gulen again writing, those who have come through this educational process will be altruists who embrace humanity with love and are ready to sacrifice themselves for the good of others when necessary. So the movement that has been inspired broadly by Gulen is called in Turkish hizmet. Hizmet means service. The point and purpose of education is to train people in the end to exist not for themselves but to serve others. It's this kind of ideology that ends up underlying an entity like the Dialogue Institute that is providing this evening's meal. It is, in fact, if you think about it, both words and actions simultaneously. The creation of a meal, a communal meal, is itself an action, and what is at the center of this meal, aside from the act of eating, is likely to be the act of talking, as Ali mentioned just a few moments back, an opportunity for people to get to know each other in the informal context of a meal. And of course, in the magnificent context of listening to David and Coleman after that meal, as we digest, so our other senses are engaged by them. So that in the end, Rumi, Gulen, the Dialogue Institute revolve around an idea which is conveyed in one of Rumi's most famous passages. Come, come, wherever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, it doesn't matter. Come, come and join us, as we are the people of love devoted to God. Come, come through the door of love and join us and sit with us. Come, let us speak one to another through our hearts. Let us speak secretly without ears and eyes. Let us laugh together without lips or sound. Let us laugh like the roses, like thought. Let us see each other without any words or sounds. Since all are the same, let us call each other from our hearts. We won't use our lips or tongue. As our hands are clasped together, let us talk about it. Let us talk about it over a good meal. Thank you all very much.